Billionaire whispered, "Can I go on?" And her wedding night became a dream she never wanted to end. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The rain was falling hard against the tinted window of a black limousine parked by the riverside. The kind of rain that made city lights blur into streaks of silver. Inside, silence pressed between two people who couldn't be more different. Lila sat with her hands folded tightly on her lap, her second-hand coat still damp, the faint scent of soap and thread clinging to her. Across from her, Adrian Cole, billionaire, tech magnate, and man whose name opened doors, watched her with a stillness that felt dangerous. He finally spoke, his voice low but steady, like a verdict. "Marry me." Lila blinked, unsure if she heard right. The clock on the dashboard ticked once, twice. "I'm sorry, what?" "You need money," Adrian said calmly. "And I need a wife, a legal one. Think of it as a contract." The words landed heavier than the rain outside. On the table between them lay a leather folder, open to a document thick with signatures and red seals. Her name was already printed on the last page. Lila's throat tightened. "You can't be serious." "I am," he replied, not looking away. 3 months, no emotions, no expectations. I'll settle your family's debt, fund your mother's treatment, and when it's over, you'll walk away free. But I need someone the press can't dig into. Someone ordinary. Ordinary. That word stung more than she expected. Outside, thunder rolled over the city skyline. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Because you said no to me once," he said, leaning back. "And no one ever does." She remembered that day 3 weeks ago, when she worked at the tailor shop that supplied his company's uniforms. He'd asked for a rush job at midnight. She'd refused politely, saying her mother was sick. He'd looked at her then with faint surprise, then something like respect. Now here he was, offering her a deal that felt more like a storm. "I can't marry someone I don't know," she whispered. "You don't have to know me," Adrian replied. "You just have to play your part." Her pulse raced. Through the tinted glass, the city moved on, unaware that one woman's life was being rewritten in the backseat of a car. She thought of her mother's hospital bills piling up, the eviction notice waiting on her kitchen counter, the little sewing machine that hadn't stopped humming since her father died. "It's a marriage on paper," she repeated, more to herself than him. "Yes," he said, his gaze unwavering. "A business arrangement, nothing more." The engine purred softly, the heater breathing warmth into the cold air. Lila closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost hear her mother's voice. Asterisk. "Sometimes, to survive, you must walk through a storm barefoot." Asterisk. When she opened them again, she reached for the pen. Her hand trembled, the gold nib catching the light. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll sign." Adrian didn't smile. He only nodded, sliding the paper closer. The moment her signature touched the page, she felt the world tilt slightly, as if fate itself had taken a deep breath. The rain outside slowed to a whisper. He closed the folder, his tone unreadable. "The ceremony is in 3 days." 3 days? She echoed, startled. "The world doesn't wait, Mrs. Cole," he said, and for the first time, a faint crack appeared in his controlled voice, a flicker of something human beneath the armor. Then, almost too softly to hear, he murmured, "Can I go on?" Lila looked up, confused, but he had already turned away, eyes fixed on the window, where the city lights reflected like ghosts of choices neither of them could take back. 3 days later, the sound of camera shutters echoed through the grand marble hall of the Cole family mansion. Lila stood beneath a chandelier that looked like a frozen storm, her hands hidden inside white satin gloves that were slightly too big. The lace veil framed her nervous smile, the kind that tries to look brave but trembles anyway. Across from her, Adrian Cole stood tall and composed, every inch the billionaire groom the tabloids adored. Reporters whispered about the mystery bride, the nobody who had somehow captured the city's most untouchable man. Lila barely heard the officiant's voice. Her pulse drowned everything out. When Adrian slipped the ring on her finger, his touch was steady, rehearsed, but his eyes dark, unreadable, met hers for just a second too long. "Do you, Lila Bennett, take Adrian Cole?" the officiant said. She swallowed hard. "I do." The flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. Within minutes, it was done. "Mrs. Cole." The name felt heavy in her mouth. As they walked down the aisle, his hand rested lightly on hers, all for show. The car ride back to the mansion was silent except for the soft hum of the engine. Through the window, Lila watched the city recede, the same streets, where she had once waited for the bus in the rain, now a blur behind tinted glass. Adrian finally broke the silence. "You handled that well." "Handled what? Becoming a headline?" she asked softly. He glanced at her, a flicker of something almost like amusement crossing his face. "You did not faint. That is a good start." She let out a shaky breath that turned into a laugh she did not mean. "Thank you, I guess." He turned back to the window. "The press will die down in a few days. Until then, we maintain appearances. Dinners, events, interviews. You will have help preparing." The words sounded like instructions, not a life. When the car stopped at the estate, a line of staff greeted them with polite bows. The mansion was enormous, silent, cold. She followed him through corridors lined with oil paintings, the scent of polished wood and old money thick in the air. A housekeeper opened double doors to a room bathed in gold light. "Your suite, Mrs. Cole." Her suite, not their suite. Lila stood still, realizing what that meant. Separate rooms. Of course, this was not love. It was logistics. That night, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the diamond ring on her hand. It sparkled under the lamp, beautiful and strange, like it belonged to someone else. Down the hall, she could hear the faint rhythm of Adrian's footsteps stopping outside her door. A pause, then silence. He did not knock. The next morning began before sunrise. A woman named Clara, Adrian's assistant, appeared with a clipboard and a garment bag. "Mr. Cole asked me to help you prepare for the charity gala tonight," she said briskly. "You will need to look confident but understated." Lila nodded, unsure what either of those words felt like. Hours later, as the limousine rolled toward the downtown hotel hosting the event, she caught her reflection in the window. The woman staring back looked flawless, hair pinned, dress flowing like liquid silver. But beneath the glamour, her heart still raced like a trapped bird. Adrian sat beside her, scrolling through his phone. "You look fine," he said without looking up. "Fine?" she echoed. He smirked faintly. "Better than fine. Try to smile tonight. The board prefers happy couples." The way he said it stung, but she forced a polite nod. The moment they entered the ballroom, a sea of cameras turned toward them. Flash. Applause. Whispers. Adrian's hand slipped around her waist, guiding her forward. "Remember," he murmured, his breath brushing her ear, "we are perfect." She tilted her head, whispering back, "Are we?" His lips curved, the ghost of a smile. For now. Somewhere inside that crowded room, Lila felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The night had only just begun, and she already knew pretending to be Mrs. Cole might be the easiest part. Surviving it would be harder. The gala stretched late into the night, and for hours Lila smiled until her cheeks ached. She listened to strangers talk about market shares, luxury cars, and vacation homes on islands she had never heard of. Every time she started to relax, another camera flash reminded her that she was being watched. Adrian moved through the room like a man born for it, calm, elegant, perfectly distant. He introduced her when needed, his hand at her back just enough to guide, never to hold. Once, during a toast, a guest leaned close and whispered, "Lucky girl." Lila forced a smile, pretending she did not hear the tone of envy, edged with disbelief. Near midnight, Adrian excused them both. In the limousine, the city lights rolled past in silence. Lila exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" Adrian looked up from his phone, the question catching him off guard. "Pretending? That everything is fine. That you are fine," she said quietly. For a long moment, he did not answer. Then, softly, "Pretending is easier than explaining." When they returned to the mansion, he walked her to the door of her suite. "You did well tonight," he said, his tone clipped but softer than usual. "Thank you," she replied, unsure why those words mattered so much. Days turned into a routine. Breakfast at 8, appearances at noon, dinners that felt like board meetings. Between the schedules, she found small moments of peace, sketching dresses by the window, talking to the gardener about his roses, watching the city from the balcony when the world slept. Sometimes, she caught Adrian watching her from across the dining table, expression unreadable. One evening, Clara entered Lila's room holding a velvet box. "Mr. Cole asked me to deliver this," she said. Inside was a bracelet, simple, elegant, gold, no note. Lila hesitated before clasping it around her wrist. Later that night, she passed by Adrian's study and saw him through the half-open door. He was on the phone, voice sharp, exhausted. "No, I do not care what the board thinks. The merger stands. Tell them my marriage is stable." He ended the call and caught sight of her in the doorway. For a heartbeat, they just looked at each other. "How much did you hear?" he asked. "Enough," she said honestly. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I suppose you think I am heartless." "I think you are human," she replied, surprising even herself. His expression softened. That would be a first. He gestured toward the open window. "Do you like the view?" She stepped beside him. The city stretched below, glittering like scattered stars. "It is beautiful," she said. "It feels far away." "That is the point," he murmured. "Distance keeps things clear." Lila turned to him. "Does it keep you safe too?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Sometimes, but it also keeps you lonely." The words lingered between them like the faint hum of the city below. For the first time, she saw something fragile in his composure, something that looked a lot like sadness. The following afternoon, Clara took her to a charity event hosted by the Carter Foundation. Children were painting murals in the courtyard, their laughter echoing against the marble walls. Lila knelt to help a little girl tie her paint-splattered shoe. When she looked up, Adrian was watching her from across the courtyard, his usual detachment replaced by quiet wonder. That night, at dinner, he said nothing about it, but his eyes lingered longer. As the weeks passed, the distance between them began to shift. He started joining her for breakfast, sometimes asking about her designs. She found herself laughing at his dry humor. It was slow, cautious, almost accidental, like thawing ice. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the windows, Adrian stopped by her room. He looked tired, his tie undone. "You missed dinner," he said. "I was sketching," she replied, showing him the rough outline of a gown. He studied it, then her. "You have talent," he said quietly. "You should not hide it." She smiled faintly. "Says the man who hides everything." He exhaled, almost a laugh. "Touché." For a heartbeat, the air between them changed softer, closer. But then, he stepped back, his voice returning to formality. "Good night, Lila." When the door closed behind him, she sat there for a long time, staring at the bracelet on her wrist, feeling something she could not name stirring quietly inside her chest. By the time the calendar marked 1 month of marriage, the routine had changed in quiet, imperceptible ways. Lila no longer waited for instructions from Clara each morning. Instead, she found herself sharing breakfast with Adrian in the glass-walled conservatory, the sunlight spilling over the white tablecloth like liquid gold. He read the paper, she sipped her tea, and sometimes they exchanged real conversation. It was not love, not yet, but it was something softer than obligation. One morning, she asked without thinking, "Do you ever miss the days before all of this?" Adrian folded the newspaper, his gaze thoughtful. "Before wealth? Or before responsibility?" She shrugged. "Before everything got heavy." He smiled faintly. "Then yes." Later that week, they attended a charity auction together. The ballroom was filled with laughter and perfume, the air thick with the sound of money being turned into applause. Lila wore a deep blue gown she had designed herself. Adrian noticed. "That dress," he murmured as they entered, "is not from any designer I know." "I made it," she said simply. "I thought as much." There was pride in his tone, so subtle she almost missed it. For most of the evening, things went smoothly until a journalist approached them, microphone in hand. "Mrs. Cole," the woman said brightly, "some say your marriage was a business deal. What do you say to that?" Lila froze, every eye turning to her. Adrian's posture tightened, ready to intervene, but she lifted her chin. "If helping someone you care about is business," she said calmly, "then maybe love is the best deal anyone can make." The crowd murmured approval. Adrian looked at her with something close to awe. On the drive home, The city lights glowed against the dark sky. "You handled that better than I expected," he said. "You mean better than you would have," she teased. His laugh was quiet but genuine, the kind of sound that made the night feel warmer. When they arrived at the mansion, he walked her to her suite as always, but this time he lingered at the doorway. "Lila," he said softly, "you did not have to defend me. I was defending us," she corrected. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once before turning away. The next few days carried an undercurrent of change. He began inviting her into his workspaces, showing her sketches of new product designs, even asking her opinion. "You see details others overlook," he told her. "That is rare." She felt a quiet pride, a connection forming through shared effort. One rainy afternoon, while reviewing fabric samples in his office, the power flickered and went out. The storm outside rattled the windows. In the dim light, she laughed softly. "So this is how billionaires spend rainy days." Adrian smiled, rare and unguarded. Apparently, just like everyone else. A silence settled, not awkward but intimate. His gaze lingered on her, the candlelight catching the reflection in his eyes. "Lila," he began, voice low. "You do not have to keep your guard up with me." Her breath caught. "I am not sure I know how to lower it." "Then let me try first," he said, stepping closer. For a heartbeat, the distance between them vanished. The storm outside faded into nothing. But before either could speak again, Clara's voice called from the hallway, breaking the spell. Adrian stepped back, his mask returning. "We should continue this later," he said quietly. That night, Lila lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The thunder had passed, but her thoughts were loud. Something had shifted between them, undeniable and dangerous. In the morning, she found a single note left on her breakfast tray in Adrian's precise handwriting. It read, "Dinner tonight, just us." For the first time since the contract began, her heart fluttered with something that felt dangerously close to hope. That evening, the dining room was unrecognizable. The long table that usually hosted stiff business dinners was replaced by a smaller setup near the fireplace. Soft jazz played in the background, and the scent of roasted herbs filled the air. Lila hesitated at the doorway, wearing a simple ivory dress. Adrian stood when he saw her, his expression unreadable but his eyes softer than she had ever seen them. "You came," he said quietly. "You invited me," she replied, her voice barely steady. They sat across from each other, the firelight dancing between them. For a while, they simply ate in silence, every clink of silverware too loud. Finally, Adrian spoke. "I wanted to thank you for what you said at the auction. You did not have to defend me, but you did. I am not used to that." Lila smiled faintly. "Maybe you should be." He tilted his head, studying her. "Do you ever regret signing that contract?" She paused, meeting his gaze. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But not for the reasons you might think." "Then why?" "Because it made me forget what I actually wanted from my life. I stopped dreaming when I signed my name." His jaw tightened, and he set down his glass. "You think I took that from you?" "No," she said softly. "I gave it away." Silence stretched again, thick and fragile. Adrian leaned back, his expression shadowed. "Lila, I never meant for you to feel trapped." "I know," she said. "But sometimes even good intentions feel like cages." He nodded slowly, as if the truth of it hurt. When dessert arrived, untouched, the conversation shifted. They talked about small things, his favorite cities, her favorite books, the kind of music she listened to when she worked. By the time the candles had burned low, the air between them felt different, less like a contract, more like a connection. As she rose to leave, he reached out without thinking, his fingers brushing her wrist. "Stay," he said softly. The word hung there, heavier than any signature. Her heart raced, but she did not pull away. "Adrian." "Just for a minute," he said. They stood by the window, watching the rain streak against the glass. Outside, the city glittered under the streetlights. He turned to her, voice barely a whisper. "You make this house feel alive again." She met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. For a heartbeat, he looked like a man stripped of all his defenses. Then, hesitantly, he reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was fleeting, reverent, almost afraid. Lila felt her chest tighten. "This was not part of the deal," she murmured. "Neither was caring," he replied. Before she could answer, a knock on the door shattered the moment. Clara stepped in, holding a tablet, her face pale. "Mr. Cole, you need to see this." Adrian straightened immediately, the warmth in his eyes replaced by ice. Clara handed him the tablet. On the screen was a headline: "Anonymous source claims Lila Bennett married billionaire for inheritance rights." Beneath it was a grainy photo of Lila entering the charity gala. Her breath caught. "That is not true," she said. Adrian's jaw clenched. "Who took this?" "The article says it came from within the company," Clara replied nervously. Adrian's silence was louder than anger. He turned to Lila, his face unreadable. "You should get some rest." "You do not believe this, do you?" she asked. He hesitated, just long enough to break something inside her. "I will handle it," he said finally, and walked away. That night, Lila sat on her bed, the bracelet on her wrist suddenly feeling heavy. Outside, thunder rolled again, and for the first time since she had signed that contract, she wondered if the storm had finally found its way inside. The morning after the article broke, the mansion felt colder than ever. The staff avoided eye contact, and the phone in Adrian's office rang non-stop. Lila stayed in her room, staring at the muted television that played her name across the bottom of the screen. "Gold digger or devoted wife," one headline read. Her stomach twisted at every word. She had expected whispers, maybe even doubt, but not this silence from the man whose trust mattered most. Around noon, Clara appeared at the door. "Mr. Cole asked me to deliver this," she said, holding out a document envelope. Lila opened it with trembling hands. It was an official statement drafted by Adrian's legal team, declaring that their marriage was private and that neither party would comment. Her name was there, waiting for her signature. No explanation, no note. Just business. "He thought this would help calm the press," Clara said softly. "He thought it would protect you." Lila forced a small, bitter smile. "By silencing me?" Clara looked uncomfortable. "He does care, Mrs. Cole. He just handles things differently." "That is one way to put it," Lila murmured. She signed the statement and handed it back. That evening, she waited for Adrian, but he did not come. She heard his car pull into the driveway around midnight and his footsteps heading straight for his study. The next morning, she found him there, surrounded by papers, his tie loose and his eyes red from lack of sleep. "You did not come home," she said quietly. "There was no home to come to," he replied without looking up. His words stung sharper than he realized. "Do you really think I would leak something like that?" she asked. He finally looked up, his expression guarded. "I do not know what to think. The timing was convenient." "Convenient?" Her voice broke. "For who, Adrian? You think I want this? To be humiliated on every screen in the city?" He closed his eyes briefly. "It is not about humiliation. It is about trust. And right now, I do not know who to trust." "Then maybe you never did," she said, her tone trembling but steady enough to end the conversation. She turned and walked out before he could respond. That afternoon, she packed a single suitcase. She left the bracelet on the nightstand and the wedding ring on top of the signed statement. The rain had started again by the time she reached the gate. Clara caught up with her, breathless. "Please, Mrs. Cole, do not go like this. He will regret it. You both will." Lila shook her head. "He made his choice. Now, I am making mine." She stepped into the waiting cab without looking back. For the next few days, the world outside spun faster than she could process. Her old apartment lease was gone. The tailor shop where she once worked had closed. And the few friends she had were too afraid of the spotlight to answer her calls. She found a small room above a cafe downtown, paying cash to avoid attention. Each night, she sketched dresses on cheap paper, trying to drown out the ache of what she had lost. On the third night, she turned on the news out of habit and froze. Adrian was standing at a podium, facing a sea of reporters. His voice was steady, but his eyes were tired. "The rumors surrounding my wife are false," he said. "She did not marry me for money or inheritance. If anyone is to blame for this chaos, it is me for letting doubt destroy what was real." Lila covered her mouth, tears spilling before she realized it. He continued, "Mrs. Cole is not obligated to return, but if she ever does, she will not find a contract waiting for her. She will find me." The clip ended, but her heartbeat did not. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the rain. For the first time in days, she let herself hope that maybe storms could wash things clean instead of tearing them apart. 2 weeks passed before she saw him again. The world had quieted down. The gossip had moved on to new scandals, but Lila still felt like she was walking through the ashes of something that used to be alive. She spent her mornings helping at the cafe downstairs, pouring coffee, pretending not to notice when customers recognized her face from the news. Each night she returned to her small rented room, the city humming softly below. She told herself she had done the right thing, that leaving was strength, not surrender. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face at that podium, voice raw, with something that sounded too much like truth. On the 15th morning, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Clara standing there, rain dripping from her umbrella. "You are hard to find," Clara said gently. "What are you doing here?" Lila asked. "He has been looking for you," Clara replied. "He did not want to scare you off by showing up himself." Lila shook her head, heart pounding. "It is over, Clara. The contract is over. There is nothing left to say." "Then tell him that yourself," Clara said, handing her a folded note. It was short, written in Adrian's familiar handwriting. "There is something you should see. Carter Foundation. 6 tonight." She stared at it for a long moment before whispering, "Why there?" "Because that is where it began," Clara said, then left her standing in the doorway. When Lila arrived that evening, the foundation hall was nearly empty. The walls were lined with children's paintings, bright suns, green fields, stick figures holding hands. In the center stood a new addition, a framed sketch, delicate pencil lines forming a wedding dress, her sketch. Below it, a small brass plaque read, "The Art of Lila Bennett, a celebration of strength and grace." Her breath caught. Behind her, a familiar voice said softly, "You once told me you stopped dreaming when you signed your name. I wanted to remind you what dreaming looks like." She turned. Adrian stood a few feet away, no suit jacket, just a white shirt rolled at the sleeves. He looked tired, but his eyes held the same steady warmth she remembered from the night by the fireplace. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because I was wrong," he said. "Because I let fear decide for me. I was so used to people wanting what I had that I forgot someone could just want me." He took a step closer. "You do not have to forgive me. I just needed you to know the truth." Lila looked at the sketch again, her name etched into the plaque, her work displayed in the place that had first brought them together. "You kept my drawings? Every one of them," he said quietly. "You brought light into this house, Lila. Into my life. I am not asking you to come back because of guilt or obligation. I am asking because I miss the sound of you laughing at my bad jokes. I miss you turning silence into peace." Her eyes burned with tears she tried to hide. "You hurt me, Adrian." "I know," he whispered, "and I will spend every day proving that I never meant to." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The air between them felt charged, fragile. Finally, she asked, "And what if I walk away again?" He gave a faint, sad smile. "Then I will keep this gallery open as a thank you to the woman who taught me how to feel again." She stared at him, her heartbeat a wild drum in her chest. "And if I stay?" His voice softened to a whisper. "Then we start over, no contracts, no conditions, just truth." The room felt suddenly small, the distance between them unbearable. She took a shaky step forward, then another, until she was close enough to feel his breath. "Maybe," she said, "we both needed to be broken to know what was real." His eyes glistened as he nodded. "Then let us rebuild it, together." For the first time in weeks, she smiled, not for the cameras, not for the world, but for herself. The weeks that followed moved slowly, like the calm after a storm. Lila agreed to meet Adrian for coffee first, then lunch, then long evening walks through the quiet streets where nobody cared that he was a billionaire, or that she had once been the center of a scandal. They talked about everything, except the past, as if both were afraid that saying it out loud might break the fragile peace they were building. Adrian began showing up at her little cafe every morning, ordering the same thing, black coffee, 1 sugar, and staying to help her arrange tables before the rush. "You do not have to do this," she would tell him, wiping her hands on her apron. "I know," he would reply, smiling. "I want to." One morning, as she reached for a stack of napkins, she found a folded check under the counter with her name on it. She opened it, eyes widening. It was a grant from the Carter Foundation for the Lila Project, a new initiative to help independent designers. "What is this?" she demanded when he walked in. "It is yours," he said simply. "You inspired it. The world should see your work." "Adrian, this is too much." "No," he said softly. "This is what you deserve." Her throat tightened, words caught somewhere between gratitude and disbelief. "You do not owe me anything." "I know," he said again, his tone gentle but firm. "That is why it means something." That night, she could not sleep. She sat by the window of her tiny apartment, sketchbook open on her knees, thinking about everything they had been through: the lies, the contract, the hurt, and now this slow, careful redemption. She realized she no longer saw Adrian as the man who had broken her trust. He was the man trying to earn it back, one quiet act at a time. The next day, she went to his office, unannounced. The receptionist froze as she entered, clearly recognizing her. Lila ignored the whispers and pushed open the glass door to Adrian's private floor. He looked up from his desk, surprised. "Lila, we need to talk," she said, her heart racing. "About the project? About us." He stood slowly, searching her face for clues. "All right." She took a deep breath. "When I left, I thought it was because you did not trust me. But maybe I did not trust myself either. Maybe I was afraid that if I let you in again, I would lose who I was." He stepped closer. "And now? Now I think love is not about losing yourself. It is about choosing someone even when it is difficult." For the first time, his voice wavered. "Then choose me." The world outside the tall windows faded to quiet. She nodded once, tears filling her eyes. "I already did." Adrian crossed the space between them and pulled her into his arms, holding her as if afraid she might disappear again. For a long time, neither spoke. When she finally pulled back, he brushed a tear from her cheek. "There is something I want to show you," he said. He led her to the rooftop of the building, where the city stretched endlessly in lights and motion. In the center stood an easel covered by a white cloth. He pulled it away to reveal a framed document, the torn halves of their old contract, pressed together behind glass. "It is a reminder," he said softly, "of what we were and what we chose instead." Lila stared at it, then at him. "You kept this?" "Yes," he said, "because even broken things can become something beautiful." The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of rain. "Adrian," she whispered, "I do not know where this will go." "Neither do I," he admitted. "But I want to find out with you." He reached for her hand. She took it, her fingers trembling, but sure. Together they stood beneath the wide, open sky, the city shimmering below, and, for the first time, the distance between who they had been and who they could become did not feel impossible. 1 year later, the morning sun filtered through the tall windows of a renovated art studio in the heart of the city. Lila stood at the center of the room, surrounded by bolts of fabric, sketches pinned to the walls, and a dozen students cutting and sewing with quiet focus. The plaque by the door read, "The Lila Project, supported by the Carter Foundation." She smiled at the sight of it every time she walked in. It reminded her that some promises were worth keeping. The soft chime of the doorbell broke her thoughts. Adrian stepped inside, dressed casually in a navy sweater, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You still forget breakfast," he said, handing one to her. "You still think coffee counts as breakfast," she teased. He grinned, the same smile that had once been rare but now came easily. "Fair point." They stood side by side, watching the students work. "You built this," he said softly. "No," she corrected, glancing up at him. "We did." He leaned against the counter, studying her with quiet admiration. "You know, the press still calls you the girl who tamed the billionaire." She laughed, shaking her head. "And yet you are still untamable." "Only by you," he replied, and she rolled her eyes but could not hide the smile tugging at her lips. The day passed in warmth and easy rhythm. By evening, the studio was empty, the lights dimmed, the city glowing outside. Adrian lingered near the display wall where one particular frame caught his attention. It was the same torn contract, preserved behind glass. Lila joined him, tracing her fingers lightly over the cracked paper. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Not for a second," he said. "That contract gave me everything I never knew I needed." She looked at him curiously. "Like what?" "A reason to change, a reason to believe that love could be real even for someone like me." She turned toward him, her voice soft. "You already changed, you just needed to see it." Adrian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Then maybe it is time we changed something else," he said. Her breath caught as he opened it. Inside was a simple gold band, elegant and unpretentious, much like the first day they met. "No contracts this time," he said. "No conditions, Just forever, if you will have me. Lila stared at him, her eyes glistening. You are really doing this here, in my workshop? It is where you built your dreams, he said, smiling. Seems like the right place to build our future. For a long moment, she could not speak. Then she whispered, Yes, Adrian. Of course, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand trembling slightly. Do you remember what I asked you that night? He said. You mean the night we signed the contract? Yes. I said, Can I go on? She smiled through her tears, and I said, Please do. He nodded, pulling her gently into his arms. I'm still going on, Lila. With you. The rain began to fall outside, soft and rhythmic against the glass, the same way it had the night they first met. But now it sounded like a song instead of a storm. They stood there, holding each other as the city lights flickered through the window. The old pain had faded, replaced by something quiet and steady, something true. Months later, their wedding was small, held in the same garden where she once dreamed alone. No cameras, no contracts, just friends, family, and the sound of laughter. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Adrian turned to her with that same tender smile. Best mistake we ever made, he whispered. She laughed, the kind of laugh that came from peace, not surprise, and kissed him as the guests applauded. In that moment, surrounded by light and love, the woman who once thought she had sold her soul for survival realized she had only traded fear for faith. The story that began with ink on paper ended not with a signature, but with a heartbeat and the promise of forever.